I fell in love with a psychopath. Madly, deeply, truly, unconditionally in love with him, and I would have done just about anything for him. Well, I did. I left my husband, my home, my family, everything I had. I left with the clothes I was wearing and walked right into my new life with a psychopath. He and I met on a website designed for affairs, please no judging. Clearly there were problems in our marriages, but that website, at least for me, was the only way I knew how to step out of the reality which was my crumbling marriage. When the psychopath and I first met, we live about 3 hours away from one another. It was a lot of emails, texts, phone calls, video chats, etc. In fact, we didn't even get to meet face to face until almost talking for 3 weeks. But by this point, he had already sent me 2 flower arrangements to my job, dedicated a bunch of love songs to me, and even told me he was in love with me. Yes, you read that right. He told me he was in love with me, without having spent time with me, face to face. The day came when we finally met and it was surreal. I couldn't believe the person I had been talking to for so long was standing right in front of me. In truth, something seemed a little off, and I thought about walking away. The very next day I wasn't even going to call him or reach out to him, but I went against my better judgment. It would be another week before I would see him again. The next time I saw him, not only did we make what I thought was love for the first time, but he even had a ring with him. Yes, a ring. He proposed to me and asked me to marry him. He told me he was leaving his wife and that he wanted me to leave my husband. He told me he was going to transfer jobs to my city and that the 3-hour commute to see his girls wouldn't bother him. The only thing he wanted was a future with me, and he was even willing to help me raise my daughter. My daughter is only 4 and his girls were 15 and 18. So after he proposed, left his wife, and made me mountains of promises of a future, a life, a happily ever after, on Friday, March 13th, 2015, I got up from my couch and told my husband I was leaving him. I took only myself, and since it was late, I told him I would be back in the morning to pick up my daughter. I left my house and called my psychopath. I told him I had left my husband and I was ready to start my happily ever after with him. Right then and there, he drove 3 hours to spend the weekend with me. That Sunday he had to drive back home, and it was the moment I got my first red flag. When he got back home, he sent me a text that he didn't think what we were doing was right, that he was going to go back home and try and save his marriage, and that I should keep the ring, because he still loved me. I tried calling, texting, all to no avail. He had completely blocked me and I had no way of reaching him other than an email. The next morning I sent him a long-winded email professing my love for him and telling him that he is the man I wanted and loved, and that I was going to fight for him, our future, and our love. For the next 2 weeks, I was living alone and he was back home with his wife and girls. My heart couldn't take it anymore, and I was very open and blunt with him. I told him that if he loved his wife and wanted to make it work with her, I would understand, but that he had to leave me alone, but that if he was really in love with me as he said he was, then he had to leave his wife and be with me. I couldn't stand being alone and having to hear stories of how he and his wife were playing house and trying to make things work in and out of the bedroom. The very next morning he told me he contacted his sister, and he was moving in with her. He asked me to call out of work and drive up to his city and spend the day with him to celebrate. I did. It was the best day of my life. We connected in so many levels, and he even took me to meet his sister. But something happened that night that I didn't know then, but I know now. It was the first time I saw that psychopathic stare. It was a scary glare that he gave me while we were out to dinner, and I didn't know how to explain it, but I know it just didn't feel right. I chalked it up to me being crazy, and continued to enjoy my time with him. That weekend, I spent the weekend with him at his sister's house. She was warm and loving, and a part of me still misses her very much. She made me feel at home and we shared a lot of conversations, almost like she was my sister too. The next few months are all a glare, but I do know that my husband emptied out our savings account and filed for divorce. My psychopath brainwashed me to use my credit to get him a new cell phone and a car, neither of which he ever made a payment on. My psychopath even convinced me to take him on our family cruise, since my husband wasn't going to be going any longer. The cruise was a horrible experience. I was devalued the entire time and even felt like I was crazy for holding on to that relationship. When we got back home, he did it again. Once he got back to his sister's house, he sent me another text telling me we were done. He couldn't handle the distance, he couldn't handle being away from his girls, and he wasn't ready to start over being the stepdad of a little girl. But I guess in the hours to come he realized he was still driving around a car under my name and decided to text me again to tell me that he had rethought the entire situation and was having a moment of confusion. He indeed did love me and wanted to be with me. The next weekend he came down to my house on a Thursday night without notice. He said he wanted to surprise me. What I didn't know then, it was to give me back the keys to my car so that I couldn't report a stolen vehicle. The next day he asked if we could spend the weekend at his sister's house and enjoy the pool. Obviously, since it wasn't a weekend that I was scheduled to have my daughter, I immediately agreed. That Friday I even called out sick to work and decided to leave early with him. The car ride to his sister's house, he was acting really weird. He was going through my phone and reading my social media accounts. I guess he was trying to find another excuse to leave me, but after a couple of hours, gave up, because there was nothing there. I truly was madly, deeply in love with him, and in my eyes, there was only him. When I came back home at the end of the weekend, he sent me a third one of his famous text messages, telling me that he realized he had fallen out of love with me and could no longer be with me. For the following month we weren't together, although he kept stringing me along. He would tell me stories of all these women he was meeting and how intimate he was being with all of them, but that none was worth keeping longer than a day or two. He made me hurt and suffer and cry, but I didn't give up, because I believed that he still loved me and that he truly wanted to be with me. 2 days before I was set to go on my second family vacation, he sent me an email telling me how much he loved me, how he was trying to replace me with every woman he found, but that no one could ever be me, and I am who he loved and wanted. Believing him because I wanted a life with him, I took him back and took him on my vacation. When my husband found out he was with me and my daughter, he drove up to where we were, asked to spend the day with my daughter, and then refused to give her back to me until he was gone. I spent the rest of my vacation without my daughter, but spending money left and right on whatever my psychopath wanted. We finally get back home and he started acting different. He went from the man he claimed to be in love with me, to almost detesting me and hating me. After all I had been through with him financially, I needed proof he loved me and not the benefit he got from me. He asked me to lend him $300 and I refused. Later on that night, when I tried to contact him, he had yet again blocked me so I couldn't call or text, but this time he blocked me on social media as well. It was my last and final discard. A couple of weeks later, he had already moved on with someone new, and less than a month later he was living with her. His divorce is now final, and last I heard he was living with his new victim. My husband and I decided to put a hold on our divorce and get some therapy to see if we could save our marriage. Needless to say, 2015 was a year of learning and growing for me. I mean, I even got a tattoo with my psychopath's name on it, my first tattoo, right after he got one with my name on. I now have covered it up with my daughter's name, the only name I will ever bear on my skin. So as you can see, I am still trying to wrap my head around everything and heal. Thank you for your time in reading my story.